This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
This morning on Saturday Breakfast, we are talking about perfectionism. We think about what it looks like in our pupils, what it looks like in ourselves, and what we can do to avoid it.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
Well, the goodest of good mornings and the happiest of New Year's to you. It is Saturday, the 4th of January 2025, and we are back. We are back with another fantastic year of sharing our breakfasts together. In case you are new to the show, my name is Darren Lester. I have been here at Teach Talk Radio for a couple of years now. Sharing my breakfast with you every Saturday morning and having the very best time. I've got to say that I haven't quite known what to do with myself for the last couple of weeks. Just whilst we have been on our break, while we've been off air. I mean, obviously it's good to have a break. Everybody needs a break every now and then. But yeah, sitting and having my breakfast alone on a Saturday morning doesn't quite hit the same. So I am very, very glad to be back with you. I hope that you all had a really refreshing, really quiet Christmas break. Mine was interesting, I must say. I love Christmas. I talk about this quite a lot on the show. Christmas is absolutely my favourite time of year. I like winter. Winter is my favourite season. I'm looking out of the window here in the Saturday Breakfast studio right now, and I'm seeing frost on the roofs of the houses opposite. It's actually freezing. In fact, it might even be below freezing right now. Let me just have a look. It's -1, so it's very, very cold. I love this time of year. Recognizing my privilege that I get to be in a warm home. I've got a roof over my head, all of the good stuff. I'm well taken care of. And so, yeah, I really enjoy this time of year. I really enjoy the build up to Christmas. My build up to Christmas was less than stellar. I'm not going to lie. I do feel a little bit bad saying that because, I know that a lot of people who are very close to me had a much worse time of it than I did as we were building up to Christmas. And, I don't ever want to feel like I am detracting from that, like I'm taking away from that. But for me, work kind of got a little bit more intense than I had assumed, which I think is my own fault. I think I had naively assumed that my transition to teaching in an online school, my transition to kind of predominantly working from home would give me a lot more control over my schedule, which it does to a certain extent. But it also doesn't to a certain extent. It was very odd. And so I think, a lot of my own frustrations in the lead up to Christmas came from the fact that my expectations weren't meeting reality, or reality wasn't meeting my expectations, I suppose. But on the plus side, I have now learned that lesson. And I know that I keep wanting to say next year, but it's for this year, to kind of, schedule myself a bit better, I suppose, is going to be the way that I phrase it. So yeah, I didn't enjoy my lead up to Christmas as much as I was wanting to. But I did enjoy the Christmas period itself. My sister and my nephews came to visit on Christmas Day, which was lovely. My brother came to visit on Christmas Day, which was also lovely. Watched lots of TV. Didn't read as much as I had wanted to. We're going to get onto that in a second because I owe you some accountability. But yeah, didn't read as much as I wanted to. Worked far more than I was intending over the Christmas break. In fact, Christmas Day itself was the only day that I had off. I say that, as long-term friends of the show know, I have been, I transitioned in the summer from working full-time in a brick and mortar school to working as head of department in an online school, which means that we don't get the same kind of the same breaks, I suppose. We are basically going to choose when we take our own breaks. And between my regular pupils, my Latin pupils, and a lot of pupils that I've had wanting some extra tuition, ready for a lot of the school entrance exams that are happening over the next few weeks. I worked every day bar Christmas Day itself, which I'm not complaining about, because my current job is a lot less stable financially than kind of working full time in a brick and mortar school. A lot of it depends on the amount of contact that I have with my pupils. I'm pretty much paid per contact that I have. So I'm not in a salaried position at the moment, which has been a little bit scary. And it has meant that I've needed to kind of take as much work as I was offered, so that those kind of lack of salary fears didn't overwhelm me. But the flip side of that is that I do have a lot more control over my schedule. I do have a lot more control over my curricula, which is kind of what I'm looking for right now. So I'm more than happy to take that flip side. And please don't get me wrong, I am so grateful to have had the opportunities for work, to have had the opportunities for the tutoring and for the teaching that I have been doing over the Christmas break. So yeah, it was a very different Christmas. I do usually work a little bit, at least over the Christmas period. I still perform professionally. So, there are often concerts that I do, and I've done a few of those over the Christmas period too. There's always something going on. But this is the first time that I've worked full on non-stop over the Christmas period. As somebody who kind of went from straight from school, did a gap year into uni, did my teacher training, 3-year BEd, then straight into a school job. I've kind of always just had at least a 2-week Christmas break, where I might do the odd show, but that would be 3, 4, 5 days at the most. And so I've kind of gained a real appreciation for those who kind of work as normal over Christmas. The doctors and nurses who might be in on Christmas Day, the retail workers who are there through Christmas Eve, they get Christmas Day off and then back in on Boxing Day. All the people who kind of don't get the same time off that I've always taken for granted. And I just kind of expected to work as normal through the holidays. I've really gained that kind of appreciation. So to all of you listening who are not teachers, because I know that we do here at Saturday Morning Breakfast have a fairly substantial audience of non-teachers, but who are connected to working with children in different ways. To those of you who are not teachers but do kind of carry on a job that has required you to work through the holidays, thank you. Because now that I've kind of experienced it for myself, I really do appreciate that in a way that I thought I appreciated it before. But realistically, I don't think I did.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Parentkind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents.
Are your teachers juggling multiple technology platforms and struggling to keep everything organised? Then Toddle might be the answer. Built by a team of ex-educators, Toddle offers an all-in-one solution for teachers that streamlines everything, from curriculum planning and assessments to communication and report cards. And the best part? Toddle comes inbuilt with an AI assistant that helps teachers save time and improve their practices. 85% of schools replaced 3 or more platforms when they brought in Toddle. Teachers using Toddle say that the platform helps them save up to 10 hours a week. That means more time for what really matters, supporting students and driving academic success. See how Toddle can support your school. Visit toddleapp.com.
Hey education changemakers, ready for something special? It's Bet Show's 40th anniversary and we're throwing a free celebration just for you. Join us at London Excel from January 22nd to 24th to connect, learn and be inspired. Picture this, 300 plus speakers who truly get it, 600 cutting-edge edtech companies and all the fresh ideas you need to make 2025 your best year yet. So why wait? Head to uk.betshow.com, grab your free ticket and come celebrate with your peers. Because this is for you. See you at Bet.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
As we welcome the new year and see out the old, many of the news stories which have happened in education over the Christmas period will seem familiar. A number of newspapers and news sites give further details of the government's Children and Wellbeing in Schools Bill, which now contains more reform policies directed at schools. For example, no automatic right for children to be educated at home. A unique number identifying children so they can be tracked as they move out of school and into home education. This was highlighted with the tragic case of Sarah Sharif. The bill will also contain a guarantee that all teachers in private education and tutoring, as well as state education, must be working towards or in possession of qualified teacher status. And national pay scales will apply to all schools in England. Possibly the most important is that we may be facing a turning point away from the era of academisation, since the Schools Bill will end the automatic academisation of failing schools. The news site The Conversation, in a long read analysis of the era of academised schools, discusses whether or not they've been a success. With such a variety of academised schools, large academy chains and small, it's very difficult to compare one with another, they conclude. Overall, though, additional needs students are served better in non-academy schools, and teachers tend to have lower job satisfaction inside academy schools. A related story, which has appeared in The Guardian and the Times Education Supplement, as well as the BBC, concerns Mossbourne School, the standard bearer for the ultra-disciplined school, with chanting students before lessons, silent corridors, and draconian rules applied. A large number of parents at Mossbourne signed an open letter to the Guardian supporting the school, saying that it provided a caring and supportive and successful environment for their students and their children. This was in response to a number of stories in reaction to former teachers at the school and a number of other parents who described the school as psychologically abusive and scary. The debate about this kind of school will no doubt continue and will divide parents and divide teachers during 2025. A story familiar in 2024 is again in the news. Reported by the BBC, the Children's Laureate, Frank Cottrell Boyce, described the enormous equality gap which has been created by Britain's decaying schools. The leaking roofs, the rattling windows, the poor heating systems, and the poor quality of equipment found mostly and disproportionately in areas of disadvantage. The Children's Laureate notes that this will cause long and lasting damage to these children's lives. And this is supported, as the BBC reports, by the Institute for Fiscal Studies, who found that in the last decade, spending on school buildings was 25% lower than in the previous decade. So no doubt news stories in the year ahead will be further reflections on the consequences of a decade of austerity. One of the most troubling stories which appeared in the Times Education supplement was in response to a Department for Education survey, which revealed that between January and March of 2024, a quarter of schools reported weapons-related incidents, mostly concerning students bringing knives into school. And 1 in 10 teachers revealed during the same period knife-related incidents in their classrooms. And the survey organisation, Teachers Tap, revealed that in May last year, a quarter of teachers felt that poor behaviour in their classrooms was undermining their well-being. Something many of us have suspected for a long time was also revealed in Teachers Tab, as a survey of the number of detentions given out in the week before Christmas revealed that maths teachers were altogether more likely to give out detentions than art teachers. For all those who remember their maths lessons as being strict and their art lessons as being fun, alas, this supported that stereotype. Teachers Tap also revealed that in the week before Christmas, schools in disadvantaged areas were twice as likely to have given out detentions. And as we enter the new year, a survey in the Times Educational Supplement reveals, unsurprisingly, that only a third of teachers have any confidence that any length of Ofsted inspection is capable of truly and accurately reflecting the quality of a school. And wishing you a happy new year, that concludes the Teachers Talk Radio News for the Christmas period, brought to you by John Gibbs on Teachers Talk Radio.
Thank you, John, for that roundup of all the news that has happened over the Christmas period. I, for one, am very much in favour of tighter regulations over those who set themselves up as teachers, as tutors. I've spoken on the show before about the concept of professionalism and about how in teaching we often lack a lot of the markers that traditionally reflect a profession. You know, we lack the self-governing body. We lack in the UK specifically, we lack the requirements for compulsory continued education. There are all sorts of things that are missing. And one of the big things that we lack is realistically any kind of control over people setting themselves up to be teachers, calling themselves teachers. It is rightly, it is illegal to impersonate a police officer. In this country, it's illegal to say that you are a police officer if you are not. I am not a qualified doctor, therefore I cannot prescribe my own antidepressants. And even if I were a qualified doctor, I wouldn't be allowed to prescribe my own antidepressants. I would need somebody else to do it for me. So why is it okay that just about anybody can set themselves up as a tutor? I was reading a doctorate forum over the last weekend, because I've been trying to kind of do something to keep my doctoral studies going while I wait for supervisor assignment. And there was a whole thread, granted in the US, but there was a whole thread along the lines of how much teaching experience are you getting on your doctorate? And my gut reaction as, a qualified teacher was, well, why should you have teaching experience? What is qualifying you to teach? And of course, a lot of people, particularly those who set themselves up in tutoring businesses, will say, oh, well, I've got the subject knowledge. I have a first from Oxford in history, and therefore I can teach it. But what a lot of people, I think, forget, or maybe don't realize, is that you knowing something doesn't mean that you can successfully get somebody else to know that same thing. They are different skill sets, and as a good teacher, you need both. You need to understand the subject for yourself, but you also need to have the training, the skills, the experience to successfully have somebody else understand it. So, and I'm not saying that people currently working as non-qualified teachers, and I'm not saying that people currently working as tutors who are not qualified teachers are doing a poor job. I wouldn't be a good police officer. I would be an awful police officer, but maybe I would be a good doctor. But the fact of the matter is, I'm not qualified to do that. And so I shouldn't be doing it. If I wanted to do it, I could qualify. And so I think, looking at making sure that people who are teaching are in fact qualified to teach is a step in the right direction for ensuring the integrity of our profession, and for kind of helping us to reclaim that professional status for ourselves that quite often we lack. So, I promised back in September that in the first show in January, we would check in about the goals that I set for myself. So, the first show of the new academic year, right back at the beginning of September, we did a goal setting workshop. If you are thinking about setting yourselves to New Year's resolutions, we'll talk about that in a minute, and you haven't kind of done that yet, and you haven't listened to that show from back in September, please do go back and give it a listen, because I kind of go through some of the different strategies that you can use to set yourself some goals, some different things to think about, and within that show I give you time to do it. So it might be something just to have on in the background while you are setting your resolutions. But I set myself some goals, and I promised you that I would check in with you about them in the new year, and I can safely say I failed at all of them. Not a single goal that I set in that show was achieved. Now, I have already done the whole self-mollifying thing of, oh, well, the autumn term was much busier than I was expecting. I thankfully had more teaching work going on than I was anticipating having, and so I didn't have as much time as I thought I would to complete those goals. I spoke at some different events I wasn't expecting to speak at. I had an assignment due, which took up more time than I was expecting it to take. I've made my excuses, and all of those things are true. But the fact of the matter is, I didn't prioritize those goals. And, you know, two things can be true at once. It can be true that I got very, very busy. And so I don't want to say I didn't have time, because that contradicts what I'm about to say. But I didn't have the time I thought I would have to work on them. But at the same time, was I working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? It felt like it. It felt like I was working that much, but realistically, no, I wasn't. So I ended the year on 69 books, which, you know, I'm not scoffing at. I'm not scoffing at all. That's, you know, that is a lot of books, particularly because when I had hit my goal of reading 100 books in 2023, a lot of those have been kind of single issue comic books. So they are, they're quite easy to get through in, you know, 20, 25 minutes, and then you've got a whole entry into your 100 book goal. Whereas I didn't read any single issue comics last year. It was all kind of novels and kind of very, very chunky things. Good morning to you, Kieran. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. It's good to have you listening to the show today. Thank you for texting in. If you want to text in about anything we're talking about today on the topic of goals and perfectionism, then please do. If you are listening via the Podbean app, you can text straight in into the app, and I will read your text out on air. If you are listening elsewhere, you can get in touch via X, formerly Twitter, and Blue Sky. I am at Mr. D. Lester on both platforms. And again, I will read your message out on air, and we can engage. We can converse that way. If you are listening back in playback and you still want to engage, then you absolutely can. Again, through those social media sites, because, as I always say, I want to talk to you about all of these things that we are talking about today. So yeah, I hit 69 books, which I'm not mad at, but I didn't get my 100. Now, could I have read instead of zombifying in front of the TV? Yes, I could. Now, let's preface that by saying that that's not always true. You know, I make no secret of the fact that I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety 3 years ago. It was actually not long after starting the show, I think I got that diagnosis. And so there are times where reading actually is not something I am capable of doing. My brain cannot process the words properly. It is too much. And so I do just have to sit and vegetate in front of the TV, because that is physically all I'm able to do. Did I go through any periods like that during the autumn term? No. I just chose not to read. Or I chose not to read as much as I would have needed to read in order to hit my goal. We'll put it that way, because I did read. I did read. I did really well to start with at advertising the show every single week. I made up my guest cards in advance. I scheduled them on the social medias. I did really well at that in the beginning. And then I missed a week, and it may have even been the week that I was at uni, so there wasn't a show, but I missed 1 week for some reason. And then because I had missed that week, I missed the next. And then I missed the next, and then I missed the next, and then it just didn't happen again. And again, that was my own fault. That was me not getting back on the horse, I suppose. That was me going, oh, well, you know, I missed 1 week, and therefore I have failed my goal, so what's the point? And in that, kind of through that thought process, I realized that I'd lost track of why I'd actually set the goal in the first place. The goal wasn't really to have an unbroken streak of posting about the show. You know, I'm not 12 years old. Streaks are not the be all and end all of my life. The point of the goal was to make sure that I was promoting the show, because that's something that I'm not very good at. That's something that I want to improve. But I got it all misconstrued. Maybe in the way that I phrased the goal, maybe just in the absoluteness of it. I will post every single week, not thinking about what would happen when there was a week that I didn't have a show. And so I didn't actually achieve what I wanted to achieve. I didn't actually make that kind of personal improvement because I had misconstrued to myself what the goal actually was. The end point, the posting every single week to have an unbroken streak, wasn't the point of it. The point was to make the most of this amazing platform that I've been given to speak with you. And then I actually don't even remember what the third goal that I set for myself was. That's how badly I failed at that one. So, safe to say, I did not meet my goals. Do I feel badly about that? Yes, actually, I do. Now, this is something that I think I probably moaned about last year as well, because it happens every single year. Lots of the social media influencers are posting about goals at the moment, and there is this very specific type of post that annoys me, which is I'm not setting myself New Year's resolutions because I need to be kind to myself. Those posts annoy me, and they annoy me for a couple of reasons. The first is the implication therein that setting goals for yourself is not self-care, is not being kind. Because I think that actually having goals is one of the kindest things that you can do for yourself. I actually think it's one of the best forms of self-care there is. Because, I don't know, maybe this is just me, maybe I'm just telling on myself now, but I think it's very easy just to sit and vegetate in front of the TV. Particularly if you have had a long day at work, particularly if you've had a really difficult class, and then you've had to mark their books and the work wasn't of the quality you were expecting, and then you had to hand those books into your head of department because there was a work scrutiny going on, and everything can kind of compound, and then you start feeling rubbish, and so you do just go and sit in front of the TV. And I then think it's very easy for that to become a habit. Now, please don't think this is me bad-mouthing TV. I love TV. TV is life, let's be honest. But it's very easy for that to become a habit. And you then start to stagnate. And I think when you stagnate, it's really difficult to break out of that. The same as when I stopped posting about the show, when I stopped doing the guest guys. It was really difficult to break that cycle of not posting. Kind of inaction is as much a choice, is as much an action as action is. So I think sometimes, and again, I've said this on the show before, sometimes we get self-care very, very wrong. Because sometimes we talk about self-care as if it is always bubble baths and candles and doing nothing, which it can be sometimes. Sometimes you do need that. But other times it really should be goal setting and thinking about what you want out of your life, so that you're not just kind of plodding along. Particularly if that's not what you want to do. Self-care should be about making your life what you want it to be. The other thing that aggrieves me when people talk about not setting New Year's resolutions because, they're not going to put any pressure on themselves. They need to be kind to themselves. Is that it detracts from the people who really do need to not put pressure on themselves, who really do need to be kind to themselves. Because you look at some of these people sometimes and you think, well, when did you last put pressure on yourself? When did you last stretch yourself? When did you last do something outside of your comfort zone? The people who need to be saying, oh, I'm going to be kind to myself, are the people who are going through something. Maybe the people who have just had a really intense time of working on and achieving a goal and are ready to take a break. Maybe the people who are mourning the loss of somebody that they love. Maybe the people who have just gone through a period of transition into a new job and now just need to take a bit of a breather. There are perfectly legitimate times to say, do you know what? Right now, I'm not going to put any pressure on myself. I'm just going to take it easy. And I think if you don't need that, if this is not one of those times for you, then you are kind of detracting from the people who do need to do that. Now, I know that I'm sounding really harsh. I feel like I'm sounding really harsh. And, you know, I very firmly believe that everybody should do what they feel is best for them. But I do worry sometimes that we underestimate our own abilities and we kind of don't achieve what we want to achieve because we are too scared, because we can't be bothered, as is the case with some of my goals that I didn't achieve. You know, just because that state of stagnation is more comfortable than trying to do something different. And I would hate for anybody to not really achieve their potential just because they get caught up in that loop of self-care that isn't really self-care. So I think if you're going to take anything away from this little ramble of mine, I really hope it's that you kind of look at what you need regularly. I think it's important to regularly review your values, review your goals, review what you're doing, and just make sure that it is still what you need to be doing to be leading the life that you want to lead in that moment. Are you happy being a head of department, or do you want to become senior leadership? If you want to become senior leadership, what are you doing to get there? What are you actively doing right now to achieve that? Telling me that, 2 years ago you ran a whole school initiative on marking is great. But if that hasn't been enough to prompt you up to the senior leader position, what are you doing now to add on to that? If you are a head of department and actually it's not what you thought it would be and you don't like it at all, what are you doing to step back into classroom teacher? What are you doing financially to make sure that you can take that pay hit? What are you doing in terms of your department to kind of prepare them for you stepping down? Are you training somebody else up to take over that role? I think it's important. I think it's important to regularly be reviewing what you're doing and just making sure that you're on track. And, yes, January is a very arbitrary point in the calendar and all of that good hipster stuff. But why not now? Why not now? If it is this arbitrary point, then it is as good a point as any to be kind of running through what you want and what you plan to get out of your life.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Parent Kind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents.
Are your teachers juggling multiple technology platforms and struggling to keep everything organised? Then Toddle might be the answer. Built by a team of ex-educators, Toddle offers an all-in-one solution for teachers that streamlines everything, from curriculum planning and assessments to communication and report cards. And the best part? Toddle comes inbuilt with an AI assistant that helps teachers save time and improve their practices. 85% of schools replaced 3 or more platforms when they brought in Toddle. Teachers using Toddle say that the platform helps them save up to 10 hours a week. That means more time for what really matters, supporting students and driving academic success. See how Toddle can support your school. Visit toddleapp.com.
Hey education changemakers, ready for something special? It's Bet Show's 40th anniversary and we're throwing a free celebration just for you. Join us at London Excel from January 22nd to 24th to connect, learn and be inspired. Picture this, 300 plus speakers who truly get it, 600 cutting-edge edtech companies and all the fresh ideas you need to make 2025 your best year yet. So why wait? Head to uk.betshow.com, grab your free ticket and come celebrate with your peers. Because this is for you. See you at Bet.
Alright, so perhaps a little bit ironically, given my little diatribe just now about kind of pushing yourself and living your best life, we are talking today about perfectionism and why that can be an issue. Because I think, as the Greeks said, all things in moderation. You can be a high achiever, you can live your best life, you can go after the things that you want to go after without being a perfectionist, without having that excess. And getting that balance is really, really important. But I think perfectionism is a really useful thing for us as educators, as people who work with children and young people to think about, particularly at this time of year, because we are now beginning that very rapid descent downhill into exam season. Like I said, the big, expensive independent schools are all having their entrance tests over the next few weeks. We have got coursework for Year 11s will be coming to a head over the next couple of months. We have got the GCSE exams coming up very, very soon. This is that time of year where we really feel like we're on the treadmill, getting ourselves ready for exams. And this is when, particularly in our young people, perfectionist tendencies can become detrimental, and can become very, they can have a negative impact on our young people's mental health. But also for us as adults, perfectionist tendencies can be detrimental. Or they can just be very uncomfortable, and they can lower the quality of your life. So I'm going to spend some time this morning just talking about what it means to be a perfectionist, what that term actually involves. And then, as always, because this is Saturday morning breakfast, and it wouldn't be Saturday morning breakfast if we didn't look at the research, we're going to look at a study of perfectionism amongst university students and kind of think about the conclusions of that one. So my source for this first section is an article by Elizabeth Scott's PhD, which was published on the Very Well Mind website back in June 2024, so not that long ago. And this article is called Perfectionism, 10 Signs of Perfectionist Traits. And I think this is a really interesting place for us to start, because it's a good way for us to try and identify perfectionist traits within ourselves and also within our young people. So Elizabeth Scott starts by talking about how perfectionism is a double-edged sword. It can be a driving force. This idea of being a perfectionist, of wanting to get everything right, it can be a motivator. It can help you to achieve everything that you want to achieve in your life. But it can also be a personal liability. It can let you down. It can make you unhappy. It can make you ill. And Elizabeth says it's all a matter of degree. So again, like the Greeks said, it's all about moderation. She defines a perfectionist as someone who has excessively high personal standards and overly critical self-evaluations. She says that a perfectionist insists on perfection and they accept nothing shy of flawlessness. This can then manifest as a criticism of the self and of others, and in an attempt to control situations and people. And that kind of really resonated with me. I'd never really considered myself to be a perfectionist. But when I went through my first round of talking therapies a few years ago after getting my depression diagnosis, my therapist kind of drew attention to the fact that I do have this very critical self-evaluation and that I do have very high expectations of people around me. Now, at no point did she suggest that this was indicative of perfectionism. But actually, as I was reading Elizabeth's article, I thought, oh, this is kind of what my therapist was describing when she was describing me. So, this has been very much food for thought for myself, and hopefully for you too. So Elizabeth says that the first kind of sign or symptom of perfectionism, I'm not sure I like the word symptom, because I don't think we need to pathologize everything. I think you can say I'm a perfectionist without it being an entire identity, without it being an illness. I do think that quite often, as in my case, it can be tied to other things. It probably can be tied to anxiety. It probably can be tied to depressive tendencies. But I think perfectionism in itself doesn't need to be pathologized. I think it can be seen as symptomatic of bigger things. So I'm going to use the word sign. She says the first sign of perfectionism is all or nothing thinking. And this is something that, as you probably realized when I was talking about my goals, this is something that I personally suffer from a lot. She says perfectionists, like high achievers, set and work hard to achieve lofty goals, whereas a high achiever can be satisfied knowing that they did their best and achieved their goal. The perfectionist will accept nothing less than perfection. Almost perfect is seen as a failure. And, again, that absolute thinking that I had when I set my goal of I will post about the show every single week, that is an example of the all or nothing thinking, because the one time that I missed that post, I gave up because I hadn't achieved my goal. It wasn't perfect, therefore it was a failure. And, that was detrimental because as I explained before the ads, it meant that I didn't actually achieve what the goal was intended for, which was the promotion of the show, the well-being of the show. It became this perfectionist streak that I broke, and so there was no point carrying on. And this is why I think it's quite interesting to think about these things, because you can realize a lot about yourself and you can realize a lot about how you frame things. Your own personal viewpoint, your own personal lens, your own personal reality, if you like. And you can make steps to change it, to improve it if you feel that you need to. So I wonder whether you recognize all or nothing thinking within yourself, or within any children or young people that you work with, because that is the first sign of somebody with perfectionist tendencies. The second sign is being overly critical. Now, as teachers, being critical is part of our job. I'm not sure that it always should be. because sometimes when you are looking at a student's piece of work and they've achieved all of your criteria, they've achieved all of your objectives, being critical of it and finding something for improvement ends up just being petty. And it can make the student feel badly about themselves, because they will say, well, our learning objective and our success criteria are there on the board. I have ticked them all, I've achieved them all, but you're still telling me that it's not good enough. So, criticism has its place, but we do need to make sure that it is within the confines of what is actually useful and within what we are actually trying to teach, what we are trying to get our young people to achieve. Someone with a perfectionist personality, though, is much more critical of themselves and of other people than someone who is just, in inverted commas, a high achiever. High achievers tend to take pride in their own accomplishments and they are supportive of other people. But perfectionists will often spot the mistakes and imperfections of other people and will then critique those. So a perfectionist doesn't just expect perfection from themselves, but they expect it from others. And for me, that's the big difference between a perfectionist and a high achiever in school. Your high achieving pupils will have very high expectations of themselves and will set out to make sure that they meet them, but they will be supportive of their peers who don't meet those same standards, because they whether they know that they know it or not, they understand that different people have different goals, different people have different interests, and not everybody is out to achieve the same as them. Whereas for a perfectionist, that can be different, because perfection is the goal, and perfection should be the goal for all. So if you have children in your class who are critical not only of their own work, but also of the work of their peers. And, this quite often manifests, particularly in younger children. I'm thinking primary age children, you will see this quite a lot because they have less of a filter. They haven't learnt the social cues of not overly critiquing other people, and they care less about what their peers think of them. So they don't have that kind of, oh, I'm not going to stand out from the crowd by criticizing somebody else. They don't have that attitude so much either. You might find that pupil is a perfectionist rather than a high achiever. So I think in school, that's probably one of the biggest ones that we can look out for if we are looking for perfectionism tendencies within our young people. I found this next visual really, really interesting, because Elizabeth talks about the difference between being pushed towards a goal and being pulled towards a goal. So she says that high achievers often feel that they are pulled towards their goal because they have a desire to achieve them. They are then happy with any steps that are made in the right direction. Perfectionists, on the other hand, feel that they are pushed towards their goal because they have their fear of anything less than perfect. So the goal itself isn't really a motivator for a person with perfectionist tendencies, because the goal is just the baseline. The goal is what they consider to be normal, because perfection is what they consider to be normal. Whereas your high achiever will consider the goal to be excellence, and that's what they're striving for. Now, of course, while that seems very overly complicated, this idea that perfection is the baseline, it's actually quite scary, because we know that constant perfection in everything is not attainable. And it also means that our perfectionists don't really celebrate anything. because the things that we might consider to be amazing achievements, to them are just the normal standard. To them, it's just what they should be achieving anyway. For a perfectionist, it's really difficult to go above and beyond. It's really difficult to find anything to celebrate. And that's really, really sad. So I think this is why, we are often criticized for celebrating everything. Participation trophies were always the joke of millennials, not that long ago. But quite often celebrating the small things can be useful for a perfectionist to see, so that they understand that what they consider to be the baseline, what they consider to be the norm, is not the baseline for everybody, and that some things are actually worth celebrating. Now, this is tied to the next sign of perfectionism, which is unrealistic standards. So both high achievers and perfectionists will set goals, as we've already talked about on the show this morning, but a perfectionist will quite often set goals that are not reasonable. High achievers will set their goals high because they enjoy the idea of pushing themselves. They enjoy the idea of going a little bit further, and they enjoy the fact that they will then reach those goals and will have achieved something. But perfectionists will often set their initial goals out of reach because they have that unrealistic standard, because they want perfection in everything. And then because a perfectionist has these unrealistic standards, they will often reject their success because they feel that their actions are not good enough to have risen to that level of achievement. And again, isn't that really sad? That they will set these very lofty goals, which are possibly not achievable, and then even if they do achieve them, they won't celebrate it because they still don't feel like their actions were good enough. If that's something that you are recognizing within yourself right now, I hope that you will take the time to celebrate your steps to success, because they are worth celebrating. And if that's something maybe you recognize in some of your class, I hope that you will work into your lesson plans the celebration of the small steps, the micro goals, because that's a good thing for us to learn to celebrate. Perfectionists will focus only on results. So your perfectionists will be the ones who are overly obsessed with their grades. They will be overly obsessed with their reports, scores, whatever matrix you are giving them by which they are being judged. That's what they will focus on. High achievers, on the other hand, will often enjoy the process of chasing the goal. For the high achiever, it is very much about the journey as well as the destination, whereas your perfectionist will think only about the destination. They are so concerned with hitting the goal and avoiding the failure that they can't really enjoy the process of growth, of striving, because achieving the goal is all that matters. And of course, in school, this is where we quite often send out contradictory messages, because we know that ultimately exam results are important, but we do also want them to enjoy learning. We want them to take that love of learning into their adulthood, because we know that learning can be a joyful thing. And so I think, this is where we need to make sure that our young people, and ourselves, I suppose, if we're setting our own goals, if we're setting our own intentions at this time of year, we are realistic about what we're setting. And, we set ourselves goals where we actually want to achieve the thing at the end of it. But we also understand that we may not achieve it, and that the journey to that goal is just as important. Your perfectionist will feel a sense of depression if they do not meet their goals. They are often less happy than high achievers are. High achievers tend to be quite resilient, and they will bounce back fairly easily from disappointment because they don't tie up their feelings of self-worth into the achievement of the goal, because they enjoy that process of working towards it. Whereas, again, because the perfectionist feels like perfection is the baseline, they feel inadequate if they don't achieve it. So perfectionists will tend to beat themselves up and wallow in negativity when those high expectations go unmet. They then struggle to move on when things don't work out the way that they had hoped. And this is why, again, if we're thinking about our very young learners, our primary classes, this is why they quite often struggle with resilience, because they haven't had enough life yet to realize that you can't always achieve perfection. They've not been alive long enough to know that. And so, for very young learners, perfectionism does often tend to be the default, because they just think that that's what you should do. They think that you should do something and be good at it. And kind of moving from that mentality to a high achieving mentality is a learning process. And it's something that I think we should be talking more explicitly about in our classes, in our lessons. Perfectionists have a greater fear of failure than high achievers because of their focus on results. They put so much stock in results that they are then disappointed by anything less than their perfection. And so that failure becomes a very scary prospect for them. That can often lead to decision paralysis or a reluctance to start anything new, because if you're not going to be perfect at it, why bother? And so that can quite often stop our perfectionists from achieving their potential, because they don't want to try these new things. They don't want to learn a new method of doing something, even if it's more efficient, because they may not be successful at it. And because the success is not something worth celebrating, it's just the thing that should be the norm. If you're not going to achieve that, you just don't want to try. Because why would you want to try something if you don't feel like you are going to achieve what you should be achieving at it? Perfectionists tend to be procrastinators. Now, Elizabeth Scott suggests that this is paradoxical, but to me it kind of makes sense, because a perfectionist tends to be somebody, as Elizabeth says, who isn't able to adjust to their situation or their environment particularly well. This is its own kind of branch of perfectionism. It's called maladaptive perfectionism. And so if somebody is not able to adapt, then they can procrastinate because they feel out of control of that environment, of that situation. Perfectionists will quite often worry so much about doing something imperfectly that they become immobilized by that worry. They become immobilized by that fear. And I think that's quite important to remember, because I've been harping on about how perfectionists see perfection as the norm, but that doesn't mean that they always achieve perfection. They may think that it's the normal thing. They may think that perfection is the baseline. But what that means really is their self-perception is that they are always achieving below the baseline. Perfectionists aren't perfectionists because they are perfect all of the time. They are perfectionists because that's what their brain tells them should be normal. And I think it's quite natural that if somebody is so obsessed with doing something perfectly, and they're not even going to celebrate that perfection, but they're just going to see it as the level at which everybody should be operating, then if you know from the outset you're not going to achieve that, I think that paralysis is understandable completely. But of course, the downside to procrastination, the biggest issue with procrastination, is not actually the putting off of the activity, but it's the cycle that it can trigger. Because the more you procrastinate, the more you kind of ruminate on what you should be doing. You feel badly that you're not doing it. And so you then have greater feelings of fear, which then leads you to procrastinate even more, and you fall into this paralyzing cycle. We see this quite a lot with our young people with ADHD as well, when they will fall into this procrastination cycle, and then feel badly about the fact that they are procrastinating, so they will procrastinate more. Tim has texted in, very good morning to you and a happy new year to you. He says that procrastinating perfectionism makes sense to me too, because all the time they are delaying putting themselves in the area. Because all the time they're delaying putting themselves in the area, they're still in a liminal state of possible perfection. That's true. I hadn't actually thought of that, but that is very, very true. If you don't try, then you haven't failed. And you are in that liminal state. You are in that in-between state where, you haven't failed at it because you haven't attempted it yet. And I think that lots of people kind of find themselves in that liminal state. I think, Tim, you're absolutely right, because I think that's quite often what puts people off of doing New Year's resolutions. It's much easier to say, oh, I don't believe in New Year's resolutions. I don't believe, I'm going to be kind to myself. I don't believe in pushing myself, because then you don't fail, than it is to have a go. And then particularly, this came up in the context of social media influencers. So particularly if you then have to go back onto your channel and say, oh, yeah, I failed. Because apparently not everybody is as willing to admit their failure on their channel as I am. But no, that's a really interesting point, Tim. Thank you for making it, and thank you for texting in. I always appreciate everything that you have to say. You make so many really salient, really interesting points every single week. I'm always glad to have you here. Defensiveness then is our next issue with our perfectionists. Because a less than perfect performance is very painful and very scary to perfectionists, they will quite often respond defensively to constructive criticism. Whereas your high achievers will see criticism as valuable information that they can use to help to improve performance. And as a teacher, this is why I think we need to understand which of our students are high achievers and which of our students are perfectionists, because we should be differentiating our feedback based on how they are going to respond to it. Because our perfectionist students are not going to respond well to being told that something could be better. And so you've got to think very carefully about the language that you're going to couch that in, so that you don't upset them, so that you don't send them into this spiral of negativity, but so that you're also scaffolding their improvement. Quite often perfectionists will understand that they respond negatively to criticism, and they will know that it's irrational. They don't think that you are being horrible to them. They don't think necessarily that you are being mean. But it is a gut reaction. It's a reaction in them that can be really difficult to control. And so that kind of, I think, becomes a bit of a two-way street about us as the teachers thinking about how we present our critique, and then our young people learning how to deal with criticism. And not just our young people. I am not very good at dealing with constructive criticism. I've learned that over the past couple of years specifically. I welcome improvement, but I do quite often struggle with how people phrase their critique of my performance, because I do, even when I know it's not, I do sometimes interpret it as a personal attack. And, that's something that I personally work on as part of my own self-improvement. But I do think it's also something that those of us that give critique need to be aware of. Our high achievers will quite often have very high sense of self-esteem, because they see themselves working towards their goals and achieving them, and they will quite often see the goal as being quite high. The fact that I've achieved my goal means I've surpassed my baseline. This isn't true with our perfectionists. Our perfectionists quite often have very low self-esteem because they will be overly critical of themselves. And so because they will never hit, or they will never hit the baseline of perfection as frequently as they would like to, they will see most of their actions as not being good enough. Perfectionists, unfortunately, can also find themselves being very isolated because of their critical nature. So like we said right at the beginning with the being highly critical sign, perfectionists will be critical of other people as much as they are critical of themselves. And so this can very often, particularly again in our children, it can push their peers away, because people don't want to be criticized all of the time. The downside, of course, for the perfectionist is that they are also criticizing themselves all the time, and they can't escape from that. You can't escape from yourself. Which kind of ties into, I really hope we have time to talk about it, it kind of ties into the study that I read kind of when I was prepping for this show. So where perfectionists will quite often push other people away with their criticism and with their rigidity, they will then have even lower self-esteem, which then has a serious impact on their self-image and their overall life satisfaction. So that's it, that's 10. Those are the kind of 10 big signs of perfectionism for us to look out for in our young people, but also within ourselves and within our friends, our family, our partners, whoever it may be.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Parentkind are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour and enhance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents.
Are your teachers juggling multiple technology platforms and struggling to keep everything organised? Then Toddle might be the answer. Built by a team of ex-educators, Toddle offers an all-in-one solution for teachers that streamlines everything, from curriculum planning and assessments to communication and report cards. And the best part? Toddle comes inbuilt with an AI assistant that helps teachers save time and improve their practices. 85% of schools replaced 3 or more platforms when they brought in Toddle. Teachers using Toddle say that the platform helps them save up to 10 hours a week. That means more time for what really matters, supporting students and driving academic success. See how Toddle can support your school. Visit toddleapp.com.
Hey education changemakers, ready for something special? It's BetShow's 40th anniversary and we're throwing a free celebration just for you. Join us at London Excel from January 22nd to 24th to connect, learn and be inspired. Picture this, 300 plus speakers who truly get it, 600 cutting-edge edtech companies and all the fresh ideas you need to make 2025 your best year yet. So why wait? Head to uk.betshow.com, grab your free ticket and come celebrate with your peers. Because this is for you. See you at Bet.
At this point, I am just going to give a trigger warning for suicidal ideation, which is something that the article that we're going to spend the next couple of minutes talking about discusses. And so if that is something by which you are triggered, thank you very much for listening. And I suggest you kind of step away from the show at this point, and I hope that you will come back for our show next time. The reason that it's important for us as teachers, as people who work with young people, to understand perfectionism is not just so that we can make improvements within our own life, if that's something that we personally are afflicted with, but so that we can understand how it impacts our young people. And this study that I read is from 2023, so it's relatively recent. It was published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, and is by Olga Fernandez Garcia et al. It's called Academic Perfectionism, Psychological Wellbeing, and Suicidal Ideation. So academic perfectionism specifically can actually have a very detrimental effect on our young people, particularly as they get older, for all of the reasons that we've spent the last kind of 45 minutes discussing. I don't want to go through the whole article in great depth, but I do want to pull out the findings and the discussion, because I think this is quite important for us to just be aware of, to be honest. In this study, which looked at there's about 1,100 students, university students, they found that 31.8% of them had reported having suicidal thoughts within the previous year. So the study looked at students who were self-identifying as perfectionist, who were in usually very demanding degrees, and they were asking, they were filling in questionnaires, they were self-reporting all of these things. And so 31.8% of them had reported having some kind of suicidal ideation in the year before. Higher perfectionism correlated with better grades but lower well-being. So the high perfectionist students were doing really, really well at uni in terms of how they were achieving, in terms of the grades that they were getting, but they were reporting much lower life satisfaction and well-being scores than those who did not have perfectionist tendencies. There is also, they found a gender difference. So the male students that they interviewed, the male perfectionists, found that they had higher grades, they had higher levels of perfectionism than the female students did. They had higher grades, but they also reported worse relational well-being. Now, for me, as somebody that teaches the 4 to 18 age range generally. I find that really interesting because for us, we're always kind of told, the literature always talks about how it's our girls that tend to be more perfectionist. But clearly there is a shift somewhere. Maybe it's at that kind of 18 to 19 barrier, that breakthrough when they get to university, where that does shift towards the boys. Or maybe it's that we are being perpetually told that girls are more perfectionist than boys are. So we put more of our resources into supporting the girls to overcome their perfectionist tendencies. And so the boys kind of get overlooked. They found that there is a positive correlation between perfectionism and academic performance. So the perfectionist students tended to get higher grades. But there was a negative correlation between perfectionism and all dimensions of well-being. So personal autonomy, personal growth, relationship satisfaction. The more perfectionist you were, the less satisfied you were in those areas of your life. Interestingly, though, they found no correlation between perfectionism and the demand of a degree. So perfectionists were not seeming to go after the apparently more difficult degrees. You didn't have more perfectionists in, I don't know, theoretical physics than in, what can I say is a really easy degree without offending anybody? Wine tasting. There we go. And so there is no correlation there. So what this means is, according to this study, there is a dual nature of perfectionism. It's adaptive when it's aligned with achievement. It's actually a positive when it's aligned with academic achievement, but it's maladaptive when it is aligned with unrealistic standards. It means that there are these contextual factors to it, such as academic demand, such as outcomes, and these contextual factors can then influence what the outcomes actually are. And there are gender differences. So men and women do present differently. Boys and girls do present differently when it comes to perfectionism. And I think that's really important. I did last term, in the autumn term, I did a course on male mental health specifically. And it was quite interesting to me how often the male symptoms are the ones that are treated as being like the default. And we see that when we think about ADHD, we always think about the hyperactivity and that sort of thing, which are the things that the boys present with, more so than the perfectionist tendencies, which are the things that the girls tend to present with. However, there is more research into female mental health. There is more there's more of a default nature about female mental health than there is about male mental health. And so quite often we don't think about how different genders present and how that might mean different interventions are needed. And that is possibly something that, again, in schools we should be thinking about. Are we focusing on how perfectionism presents in girls? And so we are almost overcompensating for the fact that we don't see it in the boys. So the ultimate conclusion, I've kind of tried to do this really, really quickly. I will tweet out a link to this study later on for anybody who wants to actually read it. But ultimately, the takeaway from this is by the time we get to the university level, so at the culmination, I suppose, of education, we are very much seeing how high perfectionism compromises mental health. This can be moderated by academic performance, and that there should be interventions in place to balance excellence with well-being. Because we shouldn't be telling people not to strive for excellence. We shouldn't be telling people to have low expectations of themselves. But I think it's really good for us to think about when we have high expectations of our achievement and when we have high expectations of our well-being. Samia has texted in, good morning to you. Thank you for being here. It's your first time here and you found it really useful. I'm so glad. Please do come back. I'm here every Saturday morning, chatting about all things to do with teaching. I do quite often take a bit of a mental health stance because that's something that I'm interested in, something I'm not qualified to talk about at all. But I do have an interest. And so, I'm really glad to have you here and to have you joining in. That said, I am about to tell you all that I'm not here next week or the week after. I am actually in school for the next 2 Saturdays. I'm running workshops about the Lunar New Year because that's coming up very, very soon. So I will not be here for the next 2 weeks. So please, if you miss me over the next couple of weeks, please do go back through the archives. I myself have been here, like I've said, 3 and a bit years now. So I've got a whole host of shows that you can go back and listen to. Of course, it's not just me here on Teachers Talk Radio. I have got so many interesting colleagues from all sorts of educational backgrounds who run some amazing shows, both here on Podbean and live via Twitter Spaces. So you can also go back through the archives and listen to those over your breakfast for the next couple of Saturdays. I will be back with you on where is my calendar? It is there. I'll be back with you on the 25th. And I can even tell you what we're going to talk about because I have been so organised that I have actually planned all of our shows already through to the Easter holidays, because this is part of my new goal for 2025, is not being a perfectionist, but doing myself a favour, I suppose, practicing my own self-care by being as organised as possible. Ooh, okay, yeah, I'm actually quite excited about this one. 25th of January, we are going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons and how we can take a lot of lessons from role-playing, from being a dungeon master, being a games master, as it were, and what we can bring into our lessons from the world of role-playing games. This was the show will actually be based on a talk that I did a few years ago, where I spoke about kind of the things that we did during COVID when we all went online to teach that I'd hoped we would keep as we went back into the physical classroom. We then didn't, unfortunately, but I'm going to try and bring it back. So I am really, really excited about that one. So I hope that you all have a great few weeks. I am already really excited to be back on January the 25th, and I hope that you will all join me then. Do keep in touch. I am at Mr. D. Lester, that's MRDLESTER, on X, formerly Twitter, and on Blue Sky, so you can keep in touch with me on both of those platforms. Have a great rest of your weekend, and I will see you all very, very soon. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.